Welcome to chapter 14 of the book of 2nd King. The next king is Amaziah, which is going to be going through here, and then other kings later. It begins in the second year of Deuteronomy, the second law, the book of Deuteronomy. Deutero second, nomi, nomos is a law. The second year of Joas, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, his second year. Then Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, reigned. So just for a short period of time, we had two Joashes reigning, both the northern kingdom and the southern. And he was a son being 20 and 5 years old in his reigning. And 20 and 5 years he reigned in Jerusalem, so quite a long reign compared to others. And the name of his mother was Jehoiadan from out of Jerusalem. And he did the upright thing in the eyes of the Lord. We talked about that, eyes of the Lord, in the last chapter. Only not as David, his forefather. I use the forefather because literally it's his father. But we know from the context that David was not his father, so it was his forefather. And this is not, I added the italic, because if it was literal, it would just be his father. And so you have to sort of know the idiom, and it's really a Hebrew idiom that goes into the Greek and then into the English. And I try to point these out. And according to all, as much as Joash, his father, did, he did. Only the high places he did not remove, and still the people sacrificed and burned incense in the high places, wherever they were. And there, a lot of times are sacred groves, and they had certain ritual things that they did. Here it talks about sacrificing animals, burning incense, which they were not to do. Only incense was to be burned in the temple and the altar of incense. And I went through that in the last chapter also. And it came to pass, when the kingdom grew strong in his hand, that he struck his servants, the ones striking his father, Joash. And the sons of the ones striking he did not put to death, as is written upon the scroll of the law of Moses, as the Lord gave charge, saying, Fathers shall not die for the sons, and the sons shall not die for the fathers, but only each for his sin shall he die. Other countries, if tribal especially, if somebody was revolting, then they would kill the father and the family. And so this is not in the law of Moses. The law of Moses had its own peculiarities, just as other laws, but it was definitely written down for people to understand. Other laws would have been the Sharia law of the Muslims. Then there is the English law, which I believe America is pretty well founded, the Roman law, and there was a Napoleonic law, a lot of different laws that had a codex that was written down, and people knew exactly what to do. And here, a son's children will not die for the sins of the parents. And then Amaziah, struck Edom and Gamela, 10,000, and he seized Rock, which is the rock city of Petra, in the war, and he called his name Joktheel until this day. Now, where is this? This is down here in Edom, and rock city of Petra is part of Jordan today. I know someplace around there. And it's in a crevice that, I don't know, you go through this crevice, and for I don't know how far it is, half a mile or so, till you come to an opening, and then these beautiful cliff facades of the Roman period, with the temples and the pillars and so far carved into the rock, where it looks like a real building, but it's inside like a cave dug into the hillside. You can look at the rock city of Petra on Wikipedia, and it's interesting to read about. So apparently, Amaziah went down underneath and took over and defeated Edom. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Joash, son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, "Come, we should see faces." And what this dagger shows is in the bottom, the footnotes, it's we should basically go to war against each other. And Joash, king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, and there's a little story that he gives him, and he says, the thorn, which is like a weed, in Lebanon sent to the cedar, which is a big, huge, beautiful tree, vegetation, in Lebanon, saying, "Well, give your daughter to my son for a wife," which is nothing. I mean, he thinks he can, putting himself, the thorn is putting himself on a high place as a great cedar tree. And this is what Joash is trying to get across to Amaziah, because then he says, "And the wild beasts went through the field in Lebanon and trampled on the thorn." So the thorn thought it could, marry into the big tree, but that wasn't the case. It was destroyed. And then he says, "Having beaten, you struck Edom, and your heart encouraged you." You think, well, because you were successful, then you can do whatever you want. Oh, be glorified sitting down in your house. Be satisfied with what you have. Why do you contend in your evil that you shall fall and Judah with you? Well, this is exactly what happened with Adolf Hitler in the Second World War, where he attacked the Soviet Union. He had earlier went through these little countries in Europe, took over, and then France, which was a bigger country, and so he had all this pride. He's going to take on somebody bigger, the Soviet Union. Well, the German army got to Stalingrad. I think it's Leningrad today. No, not Leningrad. I'm not sure what's the name of the city is today. But the army got there. It was a long ways away from Germany, and they couldn't take Stalingrad. Finally, the Soviet Union. Here's the German army, and the Russians, Soviet Union, went around on a pincher movement, and it went down, and all this army was captured, hundreds of thousands, a couple 100,000 German troops. And they took them to Siberia, where almost all died, except maybe 20,000 got back to Germany 10 years later. So Hitler thought because he did all this wonderful things, and he's going to continue. For us, it's a good story to know that, if just because we're successful in one thing doesn't mean we're going to be successful in another. Depends on God. But Judah failed in front of Israel, and each man, fled to his tent. And Amaziah, and Joash, king of Israel, seized Amaziah, the son of Joash, son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, in Beth Shemesh. Nobody really knows for sure where this Beth Shemesh was. It was a long time ago. And came into Jerusalem. So then he goes down into Jerusalem and demolished the wall of Jerusalem at the gate of Ephraim unto the gate of the corner, 400 cubits, and that would be, I figured it out, would be 600 feet, which is 2 football fields long of the wall of Jerusalem. And he took the gold and the silver and all the items being found in the house of the Lord, ransacked the temple, and because they weren't following Kyrios, they were not following Kyrios, they were following the calves that Jeroboam set up at the beginning of Israel. And it went in the treasuries of the house of the king, and the sons of the alliances, other people that were that were tied with Judah, and then he ransacked them, and he returned unto Samaria. And the rest of the words of Joash, as much as he did in his domination, this would be the king of Israel, in which he waged war with Amaziah, king of Judah, are these not written upon the scroll of the words of the days of the kings of Israel? Second Chronicles, you'll find more other information on these. And Joash slept with his fathers, and they entombed him in Samaria with the kings of Israel. And Jeroboam, his son, reigned. Now, we heard about Jeroboam before, the first king of Israel, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. But this is Jeroboam, the son of Joash. In some places I put down Jeroboam the second, so people would know if they were unfamiliar, they could differentiate the two. And Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, lived after the dying of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, 15 years. So this Joash who came down, who ransacked Jerusalem, allowed Amaziah to reign and keep his reign. And then Joash died, and this Amaziah lived another 15 years. And the rest of the words of Amaziah, in all as much as he did, behold, are not these written upon the scroll of the words of the days of the kings of Judah? And again, 2 Chronicles has more. And they confederated against him with a confederation in Jerusalem. And he fled unto Lachish, which is someplace west of Jerusalem, down here, Lachish. It was the second most important city at the time to Jerusalem. It was taken by the Assyrians and the Babylonians right before they came and surrounded Jerusalem. And they sent after him unto Lachish, and put him to death there. And they lifted him upon the horses, and he was entombed in Jerusalem with his fathers in the city of David. So the end of Amaziah. Now go to Jeroboam the second down south. And I put this up north, the two there. And all the people of Judah took Azariah. This is another person who will become king, and I think his name was Uzziah also. Azariah was a shortened form of it. And he was a son 16 years old, and gave him reign instead of his father Amaziah. And he built Elath and returned it to Judah after the king slept with his fathers. So this Azariah goes and takes the land, and Elath is down here in the Red Sea. Ezion Geber, Elath. I'm trying to think of the name of the city now. Can't think of it. It's in Israel. It's a place people go to vacation. And then we'll see where it goes in. It says Hamath. And entrance to Hamath is up here towards the Euphrates River. And this is where the kings of Babylon came across the Euphrates and then down to the entrance of Hamath. And it's mentioned as the northernmost border in the last 10 chapters of Ezekiel, somewhere in there, where the borders of Israel will basically be down around here. This will all be eradicated by probably some type of an eradication of maybe nuclear waste or whatever, because most of the tribes are going to be up in the north, and they're not separated by weird-looking little places here and there, but the lines go straight across, and they're all equal. And I think there's 7 up north of, and then 5 below Jerusalem. So it'd be down here, 7, 5. This is in the book of Ezekiel. I mentioned that, and it's the last 10 chapters. We go through that. So he built Elath and returned it to Judah after the king slept, his father. And in the 15th year of Amaziah, son of Joash, king of Judah, now it goes back to Jeroboam, son of Joash, that would be the king of Israel, reigned over Israel and Samaria 41 years. So that's a long time for Jeroboam in Israel, one of the longest, if not the longest kingdom, I'm not sure. But that's in the northern kingdom of Israel. And he did the wicked thing before the Lord. He abstained not all of the sins from all the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And that's the other Jeroboam that started the kingdom, who revolted against Solomon and became king, who led Israel in sin by making these calves to worship instead of Kyrios. And he, Jeroboam II, restored the boundary of Israel from the entrance of Hamath unto the sea of the wilderness, according to the saying of the Lord God of Israel, who spoke by the hand of his bondman Jonah, son of Amittai, and Jonah and the whale. It's not a whale, sea monster, really. The prophet, prophetu, is a transliteration from out of Geth-Hepher. So the entrance of Hamath, as I mentioned, and then it goes down to the sea of the wilderness. So that would be, there's Hamath is up here. So apparently he got down here, the Dead Sea. I don't know what other sea of the wilderness it would be talking about, unless it was talking about the Sea of Galilee. I'm not sure. It doesn't really specifically say which one it is. So he takes over that area. For the Lord beheld the humiliation of Israel. Most of them were defeated. The army was dwindled. In the last chapter, we see that it gives the numbers of the army of Israel. And it was exceedingly bitter, and very few, and being held together and being depleted. So almost the end of Israel, but yet here we have this king who strengthens it somewhat, and being abandoned. And there was not one helping Israel. And the Lord did not speak to wipe away the name of Israel from beneath heaven. We have Israel today. And he delivered them by the hand of Jeroboam, son of Joash. And the rest of the words of Jeroboam, and all as much as he did, and his dominations, as much as he waged war, and as much as he returned Damascus, and Hamath belonging to Judah unto Israel. So now the city of Damascus is taken over by this king. Before the Syrians came down, as you remember, with Hadad and what was the other king's name? Hazael. So he goes up and apparently takes those and brings them into Israel. We're told in the prophets that Damascus will cease to exist, and Hamath is the northernmost part of Israel. That's not today. Israel just goes up to Lebanon. So Israel will take all this area again in the future. And behold, are not these written upon the scroll of the words of the days of the kings of Israel? Again, 2 Chronicles. And Jeroboam slept with his fathers, with the kings of Israel. And Zechariah, his son, reigned instead of him. So that was Israel. Now we're going to go back down in chapter 15 to Judah with this Azariah, also called Uzziah. Hope you'll continue with these kings. Pretty interesting, I think. Some of the things relate to us today. So, till the next time, God bless.